Hey, you've summoned a lesser maker. For the last 8 months, I've been building this skyscraper for Mordheim or 1490 Doom, and it's been a crazy fun build. It's probably one of the best things, if not the best thing I've ever made. I do a build video every week, so I've edited down every episode, tried to condense it down into this one long video. I hope you enjoy it. All right, have a good one. Alright, so there's a new game that has got me really intrigued. It's called 1490 Doom. I offered to help promote this game because it's centered around the terrain you craft. If you haven't already heard of this game, go check it out on GameFound. I am not sponsored by them. I just wanted to help promote a game that I think you guys might like. We're gonna make a giant wizard's tower that's literally 3.5 feet tall. Obviously, this board won't be exclusively for 1490 Doom. I think it's an added bonus, but as far as the lore for this, I'm thinking a really good concept would be that this tower might have been the tower that the two-tailed comet was spotted from. Giant telescope coming out the top. The thing I think that terrifies me most about this build is, in theory, I could do a full interior. I typically avoid interiors entirely because it's a lot of work, but I could really grow the library of STLs that we have over on Patreon if I kind of dive headfirst into this type of project. We're going to spend a lot of time on this project. If you'd like a full tutorial, this is my fortress board. This project is completed. It has its own playlist. I would hate to leave you hanging if you're interested in this game. So check out this fortress board. It has a ton of verticality. Each section has its own video. If you're interested, go check it out. 1490 Doom, you're gonna want a 2 foot by 2 foot board. They recommend a 2 foot circle, but if you're into playing games like Mordheim as well, I recommend just going with a 2 foot square. That way you can use it for other games as well. They also recommend that you keep the game pretty modular so that you can reuse the board a lot. However, I guess like to break all the rules, and I like to make permanent boards that I can just set down, pull out of storage, and just play immediately. Because this board is so big, the modularity isn't a huge issue. I always like to come up with a bunch of different routes and options, and the more interactivity that you can put into the gameplay of your boards, the less bored you're gonna get of the board. My vision for this is to kind of have a bunch of buildings latched onto this like barnacles. I think this will add a lot of scale to this building and add a lot of different playability options. Because I haven't quite figured out how this thing is going to still be able to open, I'm going to start on the back side where the hinges won't be an issue. I waited an hour for this foam seal to set, and everything was glued together and really sturdy. I built this black building on a live stream. If you want to get notified of the next one, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. To be honest, I've been planning this board for several weeks, and I'm becoming more scared of it by the second. I suffer from overthinking, and the longer I have time to think about a project, the worse that overthinking gets. So the first solution to that problem is to grab things that I've already built with, like that black building and this foundation I built and set aside a long time ago. Right now I'm just punching some bricks with a paint handle, and I textured the foam with a concrete rock. The next thing I do is I just push through the project. I just have to start, because those first couple steps are always the hardest. Once you start, I just continue to start. You got to ride that momentum, and your creative thinking will kind of guide you the rest of the way. Something I knew I wanted to do was add a bunch of buttresses to the side of this tower. I really love the silhouette of this tower, but on its own, it does look like it's kind of unbelievably big. So buttresses are gonna add that extra support to kind of make it look like it's supporting itself a bit more. I grabbed some paper towel roll and toilet paper roll and some other round shapes that I can build on to start improvising a building. I like to kind of put together some random shapes and just kind of see what happens. Lately, I've been really enjoying kind of improvising some Mordheim buildings, and I think they kind of turn out better when I don't try to plan them too much, because Mordheim buildings really do well when they look really ramshackle, and when you don't plan them and you just kind of try to put random shapes together, I do think they kind of turn out much better. Starting with that bottom foundation really does make a really interesting silhouette. To kind of finish off these turrets, I 3D printed some roofs, and I'm going to be sticking those on later. And then I cut out a shape in foam core, and for this I really like to have a really exaggerated silhouette. I press in a window that I 3D printed, and these are free STLs from my Patreon, and then I coat the foam core with a bunch of balsa wood strips. And I don't really have a rhyme or reason. I really like these to be really improvised, and I also bend the foam core into a curve so that when I glue down all these strips, it kind of keeps that shape. This building looked a bit flat, so I also added an overhang on the top left. Then for the top of this roof, I wanted a bit more verticality and a walkway here. And then I added a bit more foundation here so that I could glue this in at an odd angle. I had a dollar store pack of zoo animals, and I cut off all their heads and I glued in a bunch of gargoyles. This is a really cheap scratch building technique, and it kind of steals the show from any of your unsightly areas of your build. I even use an old metal War Master mini as a weather vane at the top here, and I think that was a really nice touch. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for helping me get to 6,000 subscribers. It's been such a great journey building with you guys. Getting you involved with all these terrain builds has been super validating. I mean, I don't really get to kind of gawk over it in person enough, but I'm just so thankful for this community. We have the best Discord server ever. That link is always in the description if you're interested in joining a great community. You guys have been rock solid, and I appreciate you guys coming back every week to see what I did that week. It's awesome. So thank you so much for being a part of this, and thank you so much for just being a great person. All right, I'll stop being sappy and I'll let you get back to your building. Go do something. Have a good one. Ugh. From Mordheim's highest spires, scholars first saw the twin-tailed comet of Sigmar. It was an omen of destruction. The day the prophecy was fulfilled, the bell of Mor tolled 13 times, an eerie warning of doom. This bell is an iconic landmark of Mordheim, and today we're going to bring it to life. Let me show you how I made it. I stippled on some super glue onto these bells to kind of hide the 3D printed layers, but I just wanted a little bit more of a texture, kind of hint at the rustiness that I'm going to be putting on later. To kind of make it look like the bell mounts have some 2-scale rope. I'm going to use pipe cleaners and just a little bit of heat that will shrink wrap all the fuzz around it, and you can use wire for this, but I like to use pipe cleaners because The fibers here hold paint better than just the smooth metal texture that wire has. So I also drew up a concept sketch, and I wanted this to be a really gothic looking clock tower. So I cut out a really strong silhouette. I wanted this to have a clock face, so I used an old shipping container, cut out a strip, and then cut out a hole for that strip to act as where the clock used to be. Throughout this process, I'm always thinking about playability. How am I going to be able to place a miniature inside this building? And breaking holes into the structure is a nice way to kind of make sure I have options in the future. I texture my foam by pressing really hard with a lump of concrete. The concrete has a really rough texture, so having that amount of texture for when I punch bricks later is going to help out tremendously. I cut out all the shapes first, and then once I had the whole building out, I did the texturing and I did the bricks all at the same time to make sure that the bricks ran across the building evenly. You definitely want to do the brick laying before the building is assembled. I have made that mistake before. Make sure you do it before. Instead of laying individual bricks, I punched my bricks with an old paintbrush. I've crimped into a rectangle, and it's by far the fastest way to do this process, and it's a really consistent way to do it. I make sure I know where I want to glue this, and then I glue it down with foam insulate. The brand is called Great Stuff, and it has a reusable nozzle, and I can hold on to this can for several months. It's definitely worth the money. All right, so we do weekly videos here. So finding time-saving techniques, like while I'm at work, I can send a print here because I forgot to start it. Those time-saving techniques to have something work while I'm away is infinitely valuable. And I feel like I have a big enough library at this point on Patreon where I could build anything I want, which I think is amazing. And if you don't know, that library is available to everyone for free, not just patrons. So if you're interested and you have a 3D printer, or maybe you're considering buying a 3D printer, but you don't know where to get STLs, I have a free resource over there. It's a one-stop shop. And if you find value in it, Patreon's only $2 or $5 a month. And thank you so much to you patrons who fund the channel and fund the videos. It's been amazing to kind of not have to need to grab it out of my own wallet and fund these videos. So I genuinely appreciate it. You guys are the best. No joke. To make this building more sturdy, I filled the gap in between the building and the convex area of the tower with the foam insulin again, and I just trimmed it in place. And then I started gluing in the scaffolding. This building wasn't super playable, so I went ahead and opened up another side of the wall to make sure that I could fit hands and miniatures into this building. Then I turned these brackets upside down, and I found a spot to finally hang the bell from. I really wanted this bell in a really prominent position, and I wasn't really sold on this area, but I figured I could make it work. I always like to put myself in a pickle or a problem that I can solve later. My mind tends to work better in that way. So I went ahead and just started adding more scaffolding and just wanted to see how this position of the bell looked in the context of the rest of the build. Once I started adding more and more pieces of scaffolding, I definitely liked the decision I had made putting it there, and so I went along with the roof. I cut out individual strips of balsa wood and popsicle sticks, and I just started gluing them in place, and then I put in a little War Master figurine on the top to act as a weather vane. And I really love this detail. I put it on most of my builds, whether it's 3D printed or an official model. And I just continue adding more scaffolding. This terrain board is going to be really vertical, so it's really important to have a bunch of walkways everywhere I can fit them. I was gifted some Skaven bits, and I thought it would be perfect for this bell. I don't know where they're from, but I really thank the person who gave them to me because they were perfect to really set this bell apart and make it a really cool focal point for this build. Now it's finally time to paint this thing. I'm going to coat all the foam with PVA glue and black paint just so that I can use spray paint to coat everything else. The spray paint will do a good job of covering the hot glue. Mod Podge doesn't cover that very well. I took it outside and I spray painted everything black. And I wanted to do a limestone yellow brick color for all the bricks on this build. I mixed a mustard color for my first color, and then I gradually added a bit more yellow and then a bit more of a yellow tan as the final highlight, and just stippled that everywhere with the fan brush. The fan brush is really good because it's more of an overbrush. You know, I'm not trying to fill the grout lines so that it will be very prominent. In limestone buildings in particular, grout lines tend to be really dark rather than white, and it adds a lot of definition. For all the wood, I went in with a mossy, mildewy type gray because I want this to look really dead and really dry wood. And I did that everywhere. There was a lot of wood on this, so I just tried to whip it out. All the windows and all the gargoyles, I did an oxidized copper, kind of like the Statue of Liberty, and I did that with the bells as well. And this is a really nice pop of color that will distract from any unsightly painting. And we're not quite done with this project yet, so we're going to be finishing the painting of this later as well. Once I got the bell all done, I painted the rope tan as well, and I was really happy with how this looked. I had to get the board out and see how it looked all put together. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think. I was really happy with this project. I hope the bell doesn't toll 13 times for you this week and you can get a lot done. All right, have a good one. Hey, you summoned a lesser maker. I found this 1/16 scale Napoleonic figure, and we're gonna make it into a monument for my terrain board. I think this is gonna be a really useful build for any game though. we're going to be really pushing the verticality on this thing because I got a lot of space to fill on this board. So let's get started. Also, this is the instruction sheet, so I'm not sure how helpful this is going to be, especially with missing pieces. We're going to have to be a little bit more creative than I initially thought. I assembled probably half of the kit and then decided to convert it from there. I was digging in my bits box and I found a skeleton from the dollar store that I got during Halloween that actually seemed like it was 1/16 scale. I built up an armature with aluminum foil and I trimmed him up to make him look more like a skeleton. This city is like a forgotten tomb, and I want this skeleton to kind of be a physical embodiment of that. So I'm using green stuff and air dry clay, and I'm mixing it together to make the air dry clay dry faster, to make it look like the clothing that was on this half-built structure is falling off of them. And then I drilled out the eyes and the snout of this horse just to make him look a little bit more skeletal as well. I'm going to emulate the scaffolding of the Statue of Liberty. I found this art. The scaffolding is what's going to make this statue super playable, and it's going to add to that half-built structure look. I'm building this out of a centimeter by centimeter square dowel, and I'm cutting it 6 inches tall, and I'm cutting out 4 1-inch support beams. I glued it an extra strut there, and you're going to need at least 8 of these if you have a kit that's similar to mine. If you don't feel like scratch building this and you have a 3D printer, I actually made a free STL that you can print out yourself at home, and you don't need to be a patron to get it. So go check out the Patreon. I have a whole catalog of free STLs you can use over there as well. As I expand the foundation here, I'd like to thank my patrons. Thank you guys so much. You really make these videos and this channel possible. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to help support the channel, leave a comment and a like. It goes a long way. And if you'd like to do a little more, feel free to subscribe. And if you want to become a patron, it's only $2 or $5 a month, and you can help support bringing free STLs to the community over here and being a part of my little corner of the YouTube. I really appreciate it. The nice thing about these STLs is I put spikes on the bottom of them, so you could just stick them right into the foam, and it will give the glue a lot more surface area to make sure these are stuck down real tightly. And then I glued down the statue and glued down the rest of the supports, and then I connected those supports with popsicle sticks. Before I primed this with spray paint, I made sure to coat the foam with Mod Podge and black paint, and I masked all the brick that I didn't want to have primed again with tinfoil, and that works as a really good mask. I don't want this to be super dark, especially the statue is kind of in the middle of everything where it's going to be in shadow. So I'm going to try and go really heavy on the light colors so it really sings through all the slatting. The risk is that you can't see any of it. So I'm going to kind of err on the side of painting it too light, and hopefully it works out. I usually paint all my architectural structures this color, and I always aim for a Statue of Liberty type look, and I was really happy seeing it at this scale and achieving it. I think it turned out really good. And when I go for a wood texture, I paint it in a dead wood type gray and streak it on the popsicle sticks to kind of work in a wood grain texture automatically. And then I like to paint my bricks as a limestone color, and I go from like a mustard yellow to a tan, and that usually works out pretty good. And this is all dollar store paint, so you don't have to spend a fortune on it. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you tackle this build yourself, tag me on Instagram because I'd love to see it. I think this is an easy enough build that anyone at any skill level can do it, whether you're scratch building it or 3D printing it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and let me know if you have any suggestions of anything I should build in the future. All right, have a good one. Hey, you summoned a lesser maker. In this video, we're gonna do a deep dive on stonework. I'm not just gonna tell you how I'm doing it, but why, so that when you're making your own custom builds, you're gonna know what materials to use and how for whatever shape of building you're making. Stonework was something I actively avoided. I was really frustrated with the end result I was getting or how much time it was taking. We're gonna cut out some individual bricks, not because I like it, but to give you guys a benchmark. I think most people start off doing it this way, and if I don't give you this to compare it off of, you won't know which texture ends up looking better. So let's start there. We're gonna demonstrate this on my 3.5 foot Mordheim board. This is built off of a Rapunzel's tower, and I'm gonna take off one of these doors and add a turret or a tower. And we're gonna kind of demonstrate these different techniques on a buttress that we're gonna attach to it. To glue all this stuff together, I'm using Great Stuff foam sealant, and it's a really good multi-purpose glue, and it also fills in all the gaps to make sure the glue is getting a lot of surface area. I'm building all this to give myself a really good foundation to put a bunch of bricks on top of. Silhouette is dependent on a good foundation. I'm cutting out all these bricks to be around 15 millimeters long, 5 millimeters high, and 5 millimeters wide. I'm making these with some offcuts of scrap XPS foam. I get mine off of Amazon, and the link to that product is going to be in the description. I don't get a huge board from Home Depot because I don't have the space for that, so hopefully this will help you source some materials that are a little easier to handle. Once you're done cutting these out, all you have to do is put all these bricks in the same container as a couple rocks, and I recommend using a lump of concrete as well, because that has a much more grittier texture, and when you shake it all around in the same container, it's going to round out all the edges and give the bricks uneven texture that's going to really pick up paint well. The heavier and the more textured your rock, the faster this will go. My container did break this time, so I had to switch it over to a different one. I grabbed this container because it was a cylinder and it was a harder plastic, so it did tumble the bricks a bit better, more like a washing machine. I'm not a fan of this method because of how long it takes. Because bricks typically are pretty square, it makes me want to lay them in even rows. I'm going to show you my preferred method for laying individual bricks in this type of method. So I think a lot of us have foam core lying around. And this is a really good way of using some scrap foam core in certain shapes that aren't really usable in other ways. So all I'm going to do is make this into strips, much like the bricks. But for this, I'm making cobblestones. So I don't have to be as precise on the widths. I can just kind of let it cut however it cuts. To get the paper off pretty efficiently, I just kind of peel it like a banana. All right, so now that I have some strips that have no paper on it, we're just gonna cut it in the same way in the other direction, just randomly. Now these aren't bricks, so I tend to try to cut these into squares a little bit more than rectangles, but any shape works. So that's kind of the benefit of this method.
For all these methods, I'm gluing my stuff down with hot glue because I prefer the speed of tacking everything down. And then for a permanent bond, I go over everything with a PVA and a black paint mix. This just helps speed up the process, and it's just the way I prefer to do things. Another reason I prefer this cobblestone method is you get to use bigger pieces of foam, so it tends to go by faster. And because all of these are irregularly shaped, I don't have to be neat about it. I can just kind of try to make it look like it's a structure rather than trying to make my bricks in even rows. Okay, so finally, let's go to the punch tool. This is my favorite way to do bricks and stonework in general. Let's start off by making the tool. I'm using an old brush for this technique. First thing I do is I pick a brush that's been heavily used. I'm going to be using my bench vise because it's so much easier to do, but you can also do this with pliers. I start off by crimping the fillet long ways, and then I clamp only the bristles, and then I pull it out. There were some bristles in the fillet still, so then I just put it back into the clamp and pulled out the remainder. After that, I just go to my workbench and I pull out some pliers, and then I crimp the tool into a rectangle. Or you could do this in any shape. I've also done this in a cobblestone way, but this is a stamp that's going to be repeated over and over again. Having the same shape cobblestone doesn't make a lot of sense. Before you punch your brick, you want to add a texture. I use a lump of concrete, and typically I would do this flat on the table before gluing everything together.
And that's why you should do it flat.
The whole idea of punching the brick is to make it so that there's only one grout line between each brick. So I fit the fillet into the previous grout, and then I kind of roll the tool over to the next brick, kind of riding that grout line. This doesn't just make it so there's only one grout line, but that each row of bricks is straight, which makes this super easy and super fast. I think this method looks better than the individual bricks, but they both have their strengths and weaknesses. The next thing we do is I coat everything with a PVA glue and a black paint mix. I tacked everything together with hot glue, but that's not a really great permanent bond, so the PVA glue will seal the foam and make it all stick together. After that, I'm going to paint everything in a yellow just to make it look like a really dark limestone. I like this for medieval cities because it means I don't have to paint the grout line and don't have to do anything like that, because limestone water damage tends to be a really dark color and it weathers up really well. I got this book because I saw some of its pictures online. I saw one that I fell in love with. This one. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to build it. And actually, I've already started. And lately, I've been terrified of this project. I want to make it right. I want to make it perfect. I've had this half finished for so long that I'm kind of changing up the concept to stay half finished. So this is my original concept sketch, and I think leaving it half constructed might be pretty cool. And I found some reference photos that kind of help support this idea. So I found this picture of this cathedral, and I found it really interesting that the front half looks almost completely finished, and then they're gradually going over to finish the back half of it. And although it's probably unrealistic to do that with this tower, in a fantasy world, I can kind of bend the rules. Make sure you like the video and comment what you think I should incorporate into this build. Let's get started. Although I want this tower to look half constructed, I don't want it to look like it's impossible to be standing. So we're going to add a couple supports in the front. When I've been away from a project for a while, it's tough to jump back in. I've learned a trick. If I deliberately mess something up, my brain automatically goes into problem-solving mode. It helps me hyper-focus on one specific challenge that I need to overcome, and it helps me not feel as overwhelmed. Now, this might not work for everyone, but it's the perfect way to build momentum, and momentum is exactly what you need right now. I'm at the stage of the build where I'm adding scaffolding, and I know this is something you've seen a lot on the channel lately, but there's a reason for that. For a game like Mordheim, adding verticality is really important, and I don't really like to use stairs because it takes up a lot of horizontal space and can kind of make it really clunky, and miniatures can't really stand on them. So adding ladders and platforms is a lot more efficient. So I'm adding some popsicle sticks in as flooring, and I'm not laying these straight and on purpose. I want this to be uneven, and the more ramshackle, the better. The hot glue strings can be kind of annoying, but if you just torch it with a lighter after you're done, it tends to go pretty quick. I 3D printed some scaffolding bits, and this is a part of some of the STLs over on my Patreon. They're free. You can download them using the link in the description. I want my Patreon to be a free resource, so feel free to go window shopping. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, it's only $2 a month, and I'd really appreciate it. Any good construction site is going to need a crane. And this is a crane that I made several years ago. It's also a free STL, and I'll have a link to that. I really like this kit, and I actually have never been able to use it before, so it feels really good to finally put it to good use. To accentuate the molding and kind of drop down that detail a little bit, I added a support underneath each one of these crenellations just to kind of add a bit more dimension and continuity between the scratch-filled parts and the toy. It helps to get the project quote-unquote finished, even though it's not completely finished. It just helps me get a closer idea of what the finished picture will look like. And then it makes it easier for me to kind of combine it all together in my head. So I'm not going to go super high detailed for the painting here. I'm just going to kind of do the basic color that I like, which is like the gray. I really like the wood to look really dried out and dead. Just a couple days ago, I was talking about how scared I was to continue this project, and breaking these into like bite-sized pieces, creating problems and then creating those solutions to those problems really helps me focus in on what I'm doing. It helps me not overcomplicate the project, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Like, whether your project is literally 3.5 feet tall, or it's a miniature that, or it's a miniature you kit bashed and you're like, man, I don't know if I can do this kit bash justice. The project that I was so scared about leaving half finished, like in world, they literally half finished it. Like this whole side is all like thought out and planned, and then this side is like construction. It is kind of poetic a little. I live for the finished projects, and so that's kind of why I kind of get things half painted and Like obviously there's like this whole cardboard tube that's not done, but these are all questions that don't have answers yet. And it will give me the opportunity and the space to kind of play around later. And I'm looking forward to that. I've had this 3D printed terrain for a long time. I installed it onto this massive tower. I've been avoiding it. And I think it's time to upgrade this and really integrate it into the board. Just by using some scratch building techniques, basic materials like popsicle sticks, foam core, and 3D printed windows can really make this thing look awesome. I reworked these window 3D files to print better on FDM printers, and I really like the gothic look of these ones. It's a free download on my Patreon. This 3D printed terrain piece just never looked finished, so I'm adding a jut out on 2 sides of the top of this thing. And this should really finish it off and give it a real focal point. I used popsicle sticks at the beginning to kind of plan out the floor plan and use those as the template to put the walls up on. Doing little things like this really helped me focus on what I need to achieve and just give me some limitations. Otherwise, I could spend forever doing this. This is my popsicle stick storage, or just kind of wood in general. Like balsa wood, cork, and jumbo popsicle sticks, clothespins, everything that I need to layer the outside of this building. Using materials like this allows me to get that ramshackle look that I always like. But just for the sake of this video, I'm just going to see how far I can get with some jumbo popsicle sticks and regular popsicle sticks. After covering all the foam core exterior with popsicle sticks, I went ahead and just glued it on. I started working on the interior, doing some floor planking and adding some supports. I didn't really like the cobble texture on the second floor, so as kind of a transition, I replanked that floor. I used some jumbo popsicle sticks to establish the roof line. To make it a little bit more sturdy, I used some cross beams like matchsticks and super glued them together just to make it a little bit more rigid. While I finish the rest of this roof, I'd like to remind you to like and subscribe. The algorithm hasn't been helping me share these videos, so if you could do that for me, I would really appreciate it. I like to use War Master miniatures for like weather vane details, and I've 3D printed these using some Thingiverse files. I think it's a really great detail to kind of top off the rest of these buildings. To really connect the top and the bottom levels, I wanted to add a bunch of supports to kind of make it look like these were really not really planned out well and add to the ramshackle look of this whole structure. And this really did the trick to kind of connect the 2 dots. So I ran out of spray paint. This one doesn't have a cap. Gosh. So all I have is dark green. So hopefully that's going to work. I've never really painted with this type of base coat before. Usually I like to do a black because it kind of mutes all the colors I'm using from the dollar store and makes it feel a little bit more lived in. Not ideal, but I mean, I can always just repaint it if it doesn't turn out good. So let's try it. I mixed up my typical limestone color, and it kind of turned out a little more orange than I would normally like. But I think with the green, it kind of complemented each other. And I'm stippling it on because this is a 3D print, and I don't want to highlight the layer lines. Stippling kind of hides the fact that there are layer lines, and it adds a texture of the paint because it's going on a little more thick. And when I base coated the wood, I got it out of frame. So we'll just stick to the plaster here, and I base coated that with a tan and then did a wash. I've had this 3D printed terrain for a long time, and I wasn't quite sure if I'd ever use it. And it feels really good. Finally getting this on the board, and it looks fantastic. I don't know why I was scared, but just by adding a little bit of scratch building, it took it to the next level. So I'm really happy with it. And it's a great addition to the terrain piece. Man, I just love how this thing is looking. And I thought I might have ruined it by spray painting it bright green. But it turned out fine. I think it's a good experiment to kind of see how the base coat can affect like the paint that I typically use. And I think I prefer the black, but this is definitely very vibrant. And if I'm ever going for that look in the future, I can definitely try that. I like the orange too. I don't say this because I'm bragging. I say this because I got terrain making to a science and to a process, and when I follow that process, sometimes I get different results when I throw another thing into it. So hopefully that's clear, but I don't know. It's kind of cool to kind of experiment and try something new, and I'm always pleasantly surprised just by doing something over and over and over again. I'm not doing anything particularly different, just changing little elements here and there, but it definitely like never gets old. And I think finishing projects, like getting something to its finished state, just is so rewarding. So if you're on the couch waiting to like jump onto another project, don't wait, just do it. Get started and finish it, because it's definitely worth it. When I'm in a creative slump, lately what's been working for me is making a mess and then trying to solve and clean up that mess will give me the momentum to kind of get over the creative hump. But today, that hasn't really been working. I need to see how other games solve problems. One of the big problems I have with this particular board, and I don't know how to solve verticality. But Necromunda, verticality is like baked into the game. I bet if I see how they solve it, I can look at it through their lens and kind of reinterpret things a bit. I want to be applying what I'm learning from Necromunda, but basically just changing up the textures. Instead of sheet metal, I'm going to be doing stonework and wood. One of the things I was seeing in a lot of the Necromunda terrain was when there was a lot of elevation change, it was being broken up between several layers of platforms. So I'm doing that here, and I'm using a brick punch to make sure that the textures are working for me. Something that I found by doing this, there were little gaps that hadn't been filled yet, and this was connecting the dots and the gaps in between the builds and the major landmarks and kind of giving them some more playable area. As someone who's constantly making Mordheim terrain, I'm constantly looking at reference photos, and I'm sort of running out. I'm kind of seeing all that there is to see. By changing up the theme and the texture of the terrain, I'm able to kind of see the obvious again and kind of go back to the basics a bit. I went to my first Mordheim tournament. I don't know, it's just so inspiring to see how other people kind of interpret the world of Mordheim differently than you. I did bring my dwarves. Holy cow, dwarves are the slowest warband known to man. I had a lot of fun, and I actually won every Mordheim game because these guys just don't die. They only go out of action when you roll a 6. Dave actually helped me drive there, so thanks so much for that. Mike gave me a bunch of walkways, and this weekend he went to Italy for the World Championship and won the whole thing, which was just super cool to be like, hey, I know that guy. I met a guy named Dylan, and he actually won gold at Under the Dice Fest. Like, his warband for his Skaven were bugs, and it was just a really cool interpretation of the rules. And as a D&D player, I really enjoy like reflavoring rules and spells to kind of fit a theme. And that's basically what I'm doing here. I'm taking the Necromunda terrain and I'm just reflavoring it to fit my theme. You can do this with anything that you're learning. And I think it's a really valuable skill to have to kind of see through the project and pick out the lessons. This is a medieval crane STL that's free on my Patreon in the Catacombs STL pack. So something I'm learning with my FDM printer is I enjoy using my FDM printer way more than my resin printer, but the auto supports for FDM printers are just way too robust. It's worth doing some extra time to import your files that need supports into like Chitubox or whatever resin printing software you're using, and then doing the auto supports there and then printing it on your FDM printer. Because these supports are just to talk a little bit more about this kit. I really like it for its versatility. I've assembled this one a couple times, and each time I do it in a different way to fit in any tight space. When I printed it this time, I did it at like 70%, so that it was at a different scale to the other crane that I've already installed onto this tower. I also installed it horizontally this time. I thought the different orientation might help it look a little bit more distinct. And as long as the crane mechanism looks like it could work, that's good enough for me. Of course, you could always scratch build something like this. I made this file free, so you don't have to. Something Necromunda does really well is it connects things seamlessly together with like fire escapes that go vertical and walkways that go horizontal. It's a seamless way to get a lot of flat areas so you can battle against people, and really tall places that you can kick people off of. I was on my Discord server, and a guy I really look up to, his name is Schnubbits. He does art for the channel a lot. He did some trees for his Wild West game, and they look really cool. He did treehouse like nailed boards that you could climb up. And I know this isn't an original idea, but I'd never thought about doing this in terrain. The spot in between this headless horseman statue and the building is really narrow. So this tree ladder, walkway, treehouse thing is exactly what I needed. And I think it's really Mordheim. Just imagining a warband coming up to this skyscraper and trying to figure out how to get up to it, and then they just pull apart a wagon and start nailing the boards onto this tree. Obviously, I kind of had to start with the foundation and the planter, and then I just kind of made sure to reinforce the whole thing with some spray glue to make sure that this foam wasn't going to go anywhere. It just helps support it a little bit. And then I tore apart a bunch of popsicle sticks and made sure that they were a manageable, like handheld board size. And then I just super glued them on. I didn't worry about manufacturing the look of the nail going into the tree, because at this scale, you probably wouldn't be able to see it anyway. I made sure I wasn't gluing them too straight, and then at the top, I assembled a bit of a crow's nest so that an archer could cover the tail of anyone else who's climbing up in their warband. I can't begin to express how satisfying it was to finally come up with a solution for this space. This footprint was so tiny, and it almost it feels ridiculous to be kind of hung up on this spot, but being able to connect the bottom levels to the top levels is so important for this board, and it almost makes the board unplayable. And being able to connect, if not done correctly, it would really ruin how this board plays. And being able to connect one landmark to another on top of that is just the cherry on top.
All right, I think we're going to leave it here today. I hope this discussion about gameplay and how to plan out your boards for creative thinking during the playtime really helps you out. For me, spending some extra time to make sure that this board is playable is essential. And I know it's not a lot that we got done, but these are big things that are going to have a huge impact on how this thing plays. So
it's hard to start projects because they just feel huge. The project I'm working on is literally huge. This is my 3.5 foot tall skyscraper that I've been working on. Honestly, I'm constantly in a state of creative block when it comes to this project, and it always helps to get some momentum. So I'm going to try to scavenge some things and just stick them on, and hopefully that will get the ball rolling. I always like to get an easy win out when I start a project, especially when I'm jumping back and forth in between things. Actually, I went to SDG Fest and it was a lot of fun. I got to play a game of Mordheim. I got to play Flames of Orion. There's some free rules, so go check them out. If you are stuck on projects, go to an event. It'll reignite that fire in you, give you that false sense of confidence to tackle a huge project. Speaking of that, I've been avoiding the top section of this, so let's work our way up.
I've been so afraid of cutting this open for so long. This is a huge choice to cut this open and glue it in place. And it's been one of those things that has stopped me from doing this project. It really kills momentum when you start questioning yourself. There are times to question yourself, but now is not one of them. So I can move on with my life a little.
I've conceptualized this building differently every step of the way. But sometimes you just gotta try and do something different. It's gonna get you excited for the project again. And honestly, that excitement is exactly what you need to get projects done. So I initially thought it would be cool to have this thing open, but the more I got into it, the more that was preventing me from moving forward on any of these projects. So by making a decision and trying to, like, I'll have plenty of decisions to make in the future. I'm just gonna have to do it differently than I initially thought, and that's okay. Do the scary thing so that you can get over it and then try to do something else. That was a huge mountain to get over, and I'm glad I'm just over it. I wanted to add a bit more three-dimensionality to the roof. I layered on and kind of shingled on some jumbo popsicle sticks to add my own texture to this roof. This was always a part of the plan. It's just a nice way to make this my own, and it actually didn't take too long either, which is really nice, especially with the complex shape of the roof. Since we were on the topic of momentum, doing these slow repetitive tasks allows me to kind of recharge, kind of mull over the idea of what I want this terrain piece to be. This part of the terrain piece could be pretty straightforward. I don't have to make it playable. I could leave it like this, but I'm not going to stop there. I want to make this roof playable, but I need a clear why. I don't want this feature to be just tacked on. I was replaying Skyrim again, and they have a clear why on why there's a path. It's connecting the road and the river. I want something similar in my board. So while I kind of figure that out, I'm moving on to a different section to mull it over. I was trying to figure out what should go here, and I did an Instagram poll, and I got a couple suggestions. I got a couple suggestions to do a shrine of some sort. That reminded me that I got a piece of terrain from Kitbash Chaos that I've been wanting to integrate, and look at that. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect for this space. So okay, so I figured out pigeons. I've seen movies where there are people who take care of pigeons in like coops, and they are on the roof of skyscrapers, and I'm going to be doing that same thing here. Although in Mordheim, it's probably they're taking care of ravens or something like that. I came across this STL from a person who goes by Zook on the Arcane Ugly Discord server, and I knew I needed to use this. And I remembered it, and it was exactly what I needed for this build. So I 3D printed it out, and last week I made a whole group of STLs for some ports, and it turned out to be perfect for the roof here. I added some platforms to the ones that didn't have it, and I did that so you could add your own variety. Because I didn't design these to go on a roof, I really had to do a lot of finagling to make it work. But in the end, I figured it out. Yeah, it wasn't too hard. Just a bit of a hiccup. I was really excited at this point. All right, I love how this turned out. It's exactly, I mean, it's not exactly how I pictured it in my head, because I mean, when it becomes physical, it always changes, but it's exactly what I wanted. There's a lot of variety, and yeah, if you think this STL is cool, I'll leave a link to it in the description. Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah. I don't have anything else to say other than it's perfect. I've been working on this terrain board for almost 6 months, and in the last episode, I finished up this roof, and I really love how it looks, but this is stuff I've done before. Today, we're doing something I've never really done or tackled, interiors. The fine detail work is stuff I'm not great at, and so today I'm going to start by delaying that effort, and I'm going to extend like a shelf here so we have a little bit more space to work with till I kind of figure out what I'm doing. Since it's Halloween, I have a bunch of these skeletons from the dollar store that I can use, and I'm thinking I have a giant skeleton underneath, like holding the shelf. I think that is going to be exactly what I need to kind of give this really gothic feel. I have plenty of these extra pieces. I just got to figure out what works together. It's basically like a kit bash, but at a larger scale, which I think is fun. I went ahead and designed some STLs, like a desk and some bookcases. And these are going to be free to be used on my Patreon. So just like all my other stuff. So feel free to go download these, whether you have a membership or not. So I got to take out all the supports here. And then they'll be ready to install. While I have you here, feel free to leave a comment and a like. It goes a long way to make sure this video reaches more people. I want to make this hobby super accessible, and you sharing it helps me out a lot. So thanks. All right, so I really want this to look like he's really bearing the weight of the structure. And right now it's actually doing pretty good. They just look like separate pieces. So in order to make it look structural, I want to unify it just a bit. So I'm going to grab some mill put and just kind of blend things together. To start off the interior, I wanted to lay the groundwork, and I'm going to be doing wood planks for the flooring, and I'm using jumbo popsicle sticks to make this really fast. You don't have to be too precise. This is a ruined building, and you're not going to see too much of this because I'm putting stuff on top of it. So you don't have to worry too much when you're doing this yourself. If you ever get a pack of popsicle sticks, you can actually clamp them together and with a handsaw take off the rounded edges. It's a lot faster to do it that way. So I spent some time 3D modeling some books, and they're a little, I printed them out a little small, so you might have to scale them up. I was planning on painting this today, but I feel like adding a little bit more detail is gonna pay off. So I'm gonna do that instead, and then maybe next time we can paint it. My favorite game is Mordheim. And I love this game so much because there's just so much depth to it. I'm obsessed. And I saw a piece of artwork that I absolutely needed to make. And it's in this book. As soon as I saw this piece of art, I knew I had to build it. A skyscraper in Mordheim is basically a no-brainer. Mordheim is a capital city, and some theorize that Sigmar destroyed it for its pride and arrogance, and there's no greater monument to that. This week, we're gonna finish building that terrain piece. I've been spending 8 months on it. The main problem with this board is I have a lot of empty spaces that need filling. There just isn't quite enough detail, and so I'm going to be adding things like architectural details like these skulls, and this is my first time attempting to sculpt them. Usually I'll design an STL and I'll 3D print it, but I think it's good to exercise different techniques and practice some self-improvement, and I actually really like how these turned out. The only problem with doing it this way is it takes a long time, and I do a video every week, so I have to find a better method. And so I'm gonna cast some new architectural details, and luckily last week I got a whole bunch of minis that I found these bat models at the bottom of this bits box, and I'm gonna recast them and use them as gargoyles on this thing. To make a mold, I just made a wood frame with some popsicle sticks, and I got some silicone putty. This is for like dental work, and it's food safe. It doesn't leak because it's not liquid, and so it's really easy to cast with. The thing to remember though is because it's not liquid, you can trap air bubbles inside of it. So I kind of break it up into little pieces, and I press it in with a good amount of force to make sure that I get all the details. And because it's putty, I'm able to stick some models on top using both sides of the mold. And those are actually the casts that I'm going to be using today. I put in some milliput, and while the milliput was still soft, I pressed it into the model, and I was able to actually kind of make them pretty flush into these architectural details. And I really love how this turned out. It was so much better than I anticipated, and I was able to kind of let them contour to the surface, which if I were to do this with resin, I would not have been able to do that. So I went ahead and filled up all the little spaces here, and it's kind of cool to reuse miniatures that were from the old age of Warhammer Fantasy into this thing. I would say over the past 8 months, I've been doing a pretty good job of building some really cool landmarks for this thing, but I haven't been doing a great job connecting them and making this board playable. And that's the mission today too. So on this section, I'm going to be adding some scaffolding, and I really want to make everything playable. So that's including the roofs. Verticality is king on a board that's 3.5 feet tall. So, and this board is kind of one of a kind. There isn't a ton of reference photos other than stuff that I've made on how to use verticality efficiently. If you have any recommendations for something like that, let me know in the comments. But I'm kind of just making this up as I go, and we're going to be putting in ladders later so that it'll be easier to paint in the future. Building a table that's this vertical makes really obscure rules in the Mordheim rulebook really useful. There's a skill that my vampires got before called Scale Shear Surfaces, and this allows a model to scale twice their movement without making an initiative test, and it makes skills like this a lot more interesting to play with. Alright, so the biggest problem with this thing is it is so huge. Not only is it super tall, it's probably not even in frame. There's 360 degrees of it. Alright, still a little wobbly. That's better. One of the things I really need to do is start plugging holes like I did in this section. I think this looked and turned out really good. I need to do more of it, and I was looking in the Mordheim Living Rulebook, and you can check out in the exploration chart. There's a bunch of prompts of what things are in Mordheim. I love to roll on this table just when I get stuck and I can look for new ideas. So I got double sixes, which is ruined hovels. And in the book it says the street consists of ruined hovels which are leaning over at alarming angles. Not much of worth is there. You find a D6 worth of gold pieces. So I've been crafting up some hovels, and I think these are going to be perfect to kind of fill in these gaps and add a little detail, and I'll be able to like wrap walkways around them too, which I think is going to be perfect to kind of like bridge the gap in between things that are like super disconnected. Like having one here with a walkway around it, I think would be, maybe not that one, maybe this one. And I could put like popsicle sticks under it, and that can bridge this section and that section together with an obstacle in the way. Because right now there's a lot of places you can like shoot from, and I do need to kind of break the line of sight just a little bit more, I think. Oh, I also 3D modeled some Hovel pieces that I just glued onto these. So obviously I was scratch building some areas like the popsicle sticks, but I was able to get some fast detail with some 3D printed elements. So you can go check those out for free on my Patreon. I'm also having some issues getting my hands in places. So I think things like this look cool, and I can definitely use them in other places, but I just can't access these buildings to be able to play on them. So sacrifices have to be made, unfortunately, but I think it's gonna make this board so much more playable. The way I do this type of roof is I get what's called jute, and I get mine from the dollar store, and a rope, and then I cut it into small little sections called wefts. And in like the movie industry, this is like how wigs are made. You just grab a little bit of it, and then just like you would place shingles individually, you can do like a whole bundle. Occasionally, it's hot, just like right now. So if you want to press it down, so this is a really fast way to do a thatched roof. And I really like the end result. It is really worth it, although it is a little bit more work. So something I'm being really conscious of is I could just litter this thing with scaffolding and it would be perfectly playable. I really love the living spaces and the communities that are built into the structures of Necromunda, and so I'm kind of doing my own Mordheim version of that. Just kind of like I wanted platforms here, and I think if I had just put platforms here, it would have looked fine. But because I put birdhouses here, it explains why the platforms are there. And I think that just adds a lot more dimension to the build. Okay, right now, these don't look impressive, but they're the structure to build on. So all I'm gonna do is rip these balsa wood strips in half. And what this is gonna do is, balsa wood has really clean edges, and I want one that looks like it's been hewn with an axe. I like to use 3D printed bits. I have a whole bunch of free STLs that you can use. Windows are really tedious to craft yourself, so I like to use a shortcut and use my FDM printer. I have completely stopped using my resin printer because I don't like the extra work that it takes to clean it or cure the prints. If you're local to me and you want one, let me know, because yeah, I need to probably get it out of my space. Anything you see neon green on my builds is an STL I've probably designed. So if you need any help tracking them down, because I know I just kind of chaotically put them places, let me know and I'll help out. Just leave a comment, and I usually get back to you in like a day. If not, leave another comment and I'll definitely get back to you. This is the part that needs some ironing out, and I think having walkways inside, yeah, I think that's gonna be perfect. Oh, dude, this thing looks so good. I was just talking to Tina Fielding, and I was saying, like, sometimes I get so caught in the weeds on these little details that I step back and I take in the whole thing and I go, who freaking built this thing? It's been so long, and honestly, I could not be happier. These last final touches this week really just turned it up to 11. And I could be exaggerating, but I'm absolutely not. I love these little buildings. They really add a lot of character and story, and they make such a big difference. But it is completely done. I'm done building on this. Next week, we're gonna paint this thing together. So if you have any questions about it, let me know. But overall, I'm just over the moon with how this thing has turned out. I can't wait to play on this thing. It's gonna be unreal. All right, so make sure you like and comment. It goes a long way to support the channel and make this video go to new people. Make sure you share it. There's a hype button down at the bottom. I really appreciate that. Summon to Lesser Maker. For the last 8 months, I've been working on this Mordheim skyscraper, and I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I've actually never spent more than a day or a couple hours painting any of my terrain pieces. But today, this thing is huge, so I'm gonna have to change that. When I paint something, I have a couple goals. One is because I paint such huge things, it's important for me that my paint isn't super expensive. So I buy all my paint from the dollar store. The other is I don't want to spend 3,000 years painting every little plank of wood to the highest degree. That's not a useful use of my time. I would rather get this thing done. So I have several techniques for stonework or for wood or for my metals that is consistent. And having techniques worked out for myself will not just save me time, but it's gonna make sure that my paint job might not be the best, but at the very least, it's consistent. Let's start off by coating all the foam. Okay, so to prime all of our foam, we're gonna use Mod Podge and black paint. You can also use school glue. Now, the other thing that I do when I'm priming something huge like this is I get a giant brush. This is from the dollar store, and I tend to not take care of these very well. And since it's $1, I don't have to feel bad about it. So, is that some of this is fully painted, and some of this isn't. We're gonna mask some things off later, but it's okay to paint things over at this step because I like to finish my builds in sections. So some of this is fully painted right now because that's how I like to work. I like to get those easy wins. So that's why some of this is already painted. Before I spray paint this, there are several things that I don't need to repaint. That will be good enough to mask everything. I like to use this because it won't ever pull off paint, not like masking tape would. It conforms to the surface, so that also helps. My favorite part about priming is it's like magic. You get to see all the little itty bitty pieces come together into one unified piece, and it makes such a huge difference. You get to see all the texture that you built into it, and it's just magic. So man, this turned out so much better than I expected, and I'm really looking forward to painting it. Break it into sections. Stonework and wood are going to be two different sections, and then metal. So let me show you. I'm going to start with the stonework because that's going to be everything that's like in the middle, and then I'm going to kind of try to work my way out. So let me show you what the stonework I'm going for is. I want my stonework to look like this yellow limestone. You can see there's some light parts, dark parts, and there's a lot of variation that I can kind of hide behind. And because a lot of this stonework is pretty flat, I can always work in some interesting texture. Because this structure is so tall, I'm gonna try to go for like a gradient from like a very saturated color to a dark color up top, where the stonework should be its most worn. And yeah, I just really like this look. This is kind of my go-to whenever I'm doing any stonework. The only thing that I'm gonna try to avoid is getting paint too deep in the recesses for me to like I'm losing some definition here. It'll probably be fine, but I do kind of want shadows. So the less paint I put on, the better. When I primed it, I also kind of faded in some, color, some black primer into the places I was gonna keep the paint on, so I can kind of spend some time to blend it in to the stuff that's already there. And all right, so I got all the stonework done, but I think I need to let this dry before I start doing the wood. I like my wood to look like this. It's like a blue color. I want it to look really dried out with some blue and brown mixed together, and then just a little bit of white. I'll be able to kind of just dry brush all the wood. That's kind of the ratio you want. And I do like to kind of get a mix on the brush so that when I stroke the color onto the model, it kind of adds an automatic wood texture. For the popsicle sticks, this is more important than like the balsa wood, because the balsa wood already has a pretty good texture, but popsicle sticks are really smooth. While I have you here, it would be a huge favor if you could help me fight the algorithm by doing all the stuff below. I'd really appreciate it. I do think that having some consistent colors across your terrain builds is a little bit more important than painting it super duper well. The reason for that is you're going to be putting a lot of your stuff together. I find it really fun to kind of break the mold with the colors that I'm picking. My stonework is kind of a wood brown color, and then my wood is kind of a stone cold color. And I think flipping that on its head weirdly works for some reason. And I think that has a big majority to it because I'm consistent with how I paint all my stuff. So when I put all my stuff together, it doesn't really clash and fight itself too much. Something else to keep in mind is because you're using cheap paints like I am, that black base coat is gonna really dull all this paint down. So I'm using an orangey brown and kind of a dark yellow for all of my thatched roof and ground color. Because of that, the black undercoat is kind of gonna model the paint a little bit, and it's gonna make a pretty interesting texture. I only go over my stuff with one coat, so I want it to be thick in some spots, and it's okay for it to be thin in others. I do all my metal colors in a like Statue of Liberty green type color, and I really like the look of this, and it's super easy with just 2 different colors of green. Over this black base coat, I'm able to just kind of slap it on and get it done really quick. I really enjoy painting this color, and green's my favorite color, so making it kind of the spotlight for, or the focal point for the build, is something I really enjoy. I also do all the windows and gargoyles this metal color green too, because it's a nice pop of color across the whole board, and it's a lot easier for gameplay for me to say, hey, if you see a green window, you can shoot through it. Man, this is a really good feeling. I've been working on this, like I said, for 8 months, and I'm so glad to finally have everything painted. It's not perfect, but like, for example, I printed out all these ladders to put everywhere, and I totally forgot about them, but I ran out of time. As it's getting closer to Christmas, it's becoming a lot more difficult to get time to get in here, but eventually I'll get to it. I think I'm just really happy to finally get this to a really good spot. I really enjoyed this build. It challenged me in so many different ways, and I learned a lot. Yeah, it's a really good feeling. And it looks really great. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Like I said earlier, help me fight the algorithm by sharing this around. I think my last video of the year is going to be kind of like a supercut edit of this whole thing. So watch that when that comes out, because it's going to be a really good one. Thanks for following along and subscribing. For all of you who waited around for all that time, I have some really cool projects in the future, so make sure you hang around a little bit longer for those. I really appreciate you guys. It's been a great year, and I'm really looking forward to the projects coming up. It's going to be really great. All right. If you want to support the channel, there's a Patreon. It's only $2 a month at the minimum to help me out make crazy things like this. This would not be possible without my patrons, so I really appreciate your support. All right, have a good one.